This morning, I have a couple of different verses. The first one is Exodus 31:15, which you should know. You probably do know it, but it's perfect for a morning like this. Some people grow up and they are biblical literalists. Have you ever heard of that term? Biblical literalist? That is, they believe that God created the world in 7 days, that a big fish swallowed Jonah whole and then spit him out onto the shore, that Jesus actually walked on the water, that the miracles, all the miracles in the Bible were actually true. That's a biblical literalist. That's what's called a biblical literalist. And so everything in the Bible is absolutely true, and you should follow it. Hammer and nail. Does everybody understand what a biblical literalist is now? Okay? Here's the verse that you can ask a biblical literalist when you come across them, because I know none of you are. But when you come across them, I want you to ask them about this verse. Exodus 31, verse 15. It says this: 6 days shall work be done, but the seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. I think about all the clergy people. Wiped out. Maybe the world would be better. I don't know about you, but my shopping day sometimes is Sunday. Does anybody else go shopping on a Sunday? Yeah. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath day shall be put to death. Biblical literalism is something we can set aside. It's something that should be set, something that is set aside by even the people who claim to be biblical literalists, right? If they're biblical literalists, there would be people who would be out killing people every Sabbath day, wouldn't there? If they were biblical literalists. Does that make sense to you? When we read this book, it is so important. But we cannot take everything literally. We just can't. That would be crazy. That's one sermon, and I have others. Proverbs 6:6. That's the one that I shared with the kids. Go to the ant, you lazy bones. In the Revised Standard Version, it's sluggard. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider its ways and be wise. In the most recent versions that are now called the Common English Version, the Contemporary English Version, those things, it's slacker. Go to the ant, you slacker. Consider its ways and be wise. When I was working at Rocky Ford, it's a small town in Colorado, southeastern Colorado, which is farm country. It's just plains there along the Arkansas River. And the church had a 5-acre lot, and I've said this before, but one of my jobs was to mow the 5 acres on Saturday on a riding lawnmower. And so I would get my overalls on and my hat, and I felt like I was a farmer. That's the closest I've ever come. And so I would mow this weed patch, basically, and there was some grass too, but I would mow. And as I was mowing, and I noticed this one day, for sure, that there was this huge ant hill there, and it was about 8 feet in diameter, so a couple more feet than this, all the way around. Pebbles, little rocks. And as I was mowing, I mowed, and the cuttings, the clippings, covered that anthill. Got a picture? in your mind? And so I stopped and I thought, oh, I wonder what this is going to do with these ants. And so I stopped and I watched, and there was a string of ants coming this way, and there was one ant that was going that way. And they met face to face. And I don't know what that one ant was saying, because he would talk to an ant, and then several would bypass him, and then he would stop right in front of another ant, and that ant would, I don't know if it was nodding its head like, okay, I got the deal. We got to clean off all this grass. A few hours later, no wind that day, that anthill was completely clean of that grass. Go to the ant, you lazy bones. Do you think the person who wrote those words actually had an ant farm? How many of you had ant farms? I just want to say, oh, good. Some of you know exactly. John, did you watch the ants? Oh, that's awesome. Well, today is the day for us to think about labor. Yes? Would you pray with me? Oh God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts help us as we journey down this road of faith together. Amen. All right, well, that's my second sermon. I got 3, maybe 4. I don't know how many I've got today. But through the Gospels, Jesus tells story after story after story about people who are laboring. He knew the people who were laboring, who were working. Work has been on our minds for a long time, was on the people who wrote the Bible's minds for a long time. It was certainly on Jesus' mind. And I appreciate that. Yesterday was my mom and dad's 63rd anniversary. And so I made a phone call like a good, son would do. I should check with my brother and sister about that. But I called them up and I wished them a happy anniversary. And my dad answered the phone, and he was sitting at the dining room table. My dad is a civil engineer. That was what he did in his job. And he loves to make maps and to figure things out. And so he had a map of the church's land, of his church's land, which is the United Methodist Church in Sorita, Arizona. And he's got all the parking spaces lined up exactly right, and he's got the picture of the church, and all the landscaping around there, and he was trying to figure out where they could put the pumpkins that they were going to sell in October, because they're doing a fundraiser. Have any of you sold pumpkins as a fundraiser? I just want to check. None of you have? It's a big thing all over the country. They ship these pumpkins out of New Mexico, mostly to church groups, to raise money. And so you get a semi-truck full of pumpkins, and then you put them on a corner and you sell them for jack-o'-lanterns or decorations in October. And you can make a lot of money. I mean, in Denver, when I was there, the Habitat for Humanity had a couple of pumpkin patches, and they made $30,000 on those pumpkin patches. It was the main fundraiser for the... Well, anyway, that's what my mom and dad's church is going to do. So my dad's telling me all about this. He's excited about these pumpkins. He's just thrilled about the pumpkins. And so my mom gets on the phone, and I say, what's going on? And she said, it's our anniversary, and your dad has spread all of his crap out on our dining room table. He has been retired since he was 59. He's 83 now. For 24 years, he has worked. He has worked doing one thing or the other. People who are retired, they don't quit working. I'm convinced of it. They're working. Sometimes they work at taking care of their spouse. Do you know anybody like that? You know some people like that? Sometimes they work out in the community, doing things like taking food down to Crossroads or volunteering down there. Do you know anybody like that? I'll bet you do. Just because we're retired doesn't mean we quit with our labor, does it? Somebody's got to go get the groceries. Somebody's got to cook the meal. Somebody's got to clean the house. You keep doing labor. How many of you are familiar with this book? It's called The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. Oh, about 15 of you. This book was written in 1923 by Gibran, who was a poet and a story writer. And this book happens to be his writings on a list of different subjects, like, for example, love. I use the reading on love a lot during marriages. And I'll do that just in the marriage that I'm going to do at the end of this month. And then on children, he has some things to say about children that are beautiful, on eating and drinking, on joy and sorrow, on buying and selling, crime and punishment, et cetera, et cetera. But there's one piece he has about work. And I wanted to share just a few of these because I think they're so good, especially on a Labor Day weekend. He says this about work. Then a plowman said, "Speak to us of work." And he answered, saying, "You work that you may keep pace with the earth and the soul of the earth. For to be idle is to become a stranger to the seasons and to step out of life's procession that marches in majesty and proud submission towards the infinite. Always you've been told that work is a curse and labor a misfortune. But I say to you that when you work, you fulfill a part of earth's furthest dream assigned to you when that dream was born. And in keeping yourself with labor, you are in truth loving life. And to love life through labor is to be intimate with life's inmost secret." I love that. To love life through labor is to be intimate with life's inmost secret. And all work is empty save when there is love. I forget that sometimes as a pastor. All work is empty save when there is love. And when you work with love, you bind yourself to yourself and to one another and to God. And what is it to work with love? He asks the question. And he answers it this way. He says, to work with love is to weave the cloth with threads drawn from your heart, even as if your beloved were to wear that cloth. It is to build a house with affection, even as if your beloved were to dwell in that house. It is to sow seeds with tenderness and reap the harvest with joy, even as if your beloved were to eat the fruit. It is to charge all things you fashion with the breath of your own spirit, and to know that all the blessed dead are standing above you and watching. Work is love made visible. Work is love made visible. I love that. Work is love made visible. In the book of James, in the New Testament, the book of James has been kind of disregarded by many because Martin Luther, back in the early 1500s, said this: the book of James is a gospel of straw. Do you know he said that? It's a gospel of straw. It shouldn't even be in the Bible. He wanted two books to be completely out of the Bible, the book of James and the book of Revelations. But guess what? They're still there. He did not like the book of James. Now, here's the thing the book of James was about. Would you, if you've got a Bible right in front of you, would you grab it? Oh, this is the new revival. This is my Bible. How did you get out here? Okay. In the book of James, page 897 for you. It's not 897 for me. Did you find it? Page 897, good. Okay. Chapter 1. Go to chapter 1. verse 22. Chapter 1, verse 22. It says this, "But be doers of the word, and not merely hearers." Be doers of the word, not merely hearers. I love that. When it comes down to it, I think this is the work that we have to do as a church. You might have other things that the church does, but this is what I think the church should be about. The church and us should do this. We should love God and love our neighbor. We should try to help the last and the least and the lonely and the lost. We should try to bring care into the world. That's the work that we have to do. Would you do that with me this week as part of your church? Help the last and the least and the lonely and the lost in some way. That's our work. Amen.